she is. Hello, dearest reader. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Victoria, and today we're going to be talking about my predictions for Bridgerton Season 3. And if you haven't heard the talk of the ton yet, Bridgerton Season 3 is going to be coming to Netflix tomorrow, Thursday, May 16th. And of course, that is going to be part 1. But part 2 will be coming in June. It's going to be June 13th. So, with all that in mind, I decided to finally pick up a Julia Quinn Bridgerton book and check out the source material for Season 3. Now, Romancing Mr. Bridgerton is actually the 4th installment of the Bridgerton romance series, but according to rumors, Netflix decided to push up the Polin, or Penelope and Colin story of Romancing Mr. Bridgerton to Season 3 because there was so much interest in the story, and they definitely had been highlighting Penelope a lot more in Seasons 1 and 2 than we would presume in the books. Now, since I did read the book, I noticed some major shifts that already were kind of set up in Seasons 1 and 2, so I thought it'd be fun to make a quick video with some of my predictions of what I think the team over in Shondaland did to still give the essence of the Colin Penelope love story, but also make sure to tie in a lot of the things that they had already put into the show, and where those pieces might fall when it comes to the story that we had in the book. And with that, as I mentioned, I'm going to give you 10, hopefully, I think I have 10. I'm going to give you 10 predictions that I have for the entirety of Season 3. We're going to talk about the specific romance, we're going to talk about some of the character changes that I noticed from the book, and how I think they're going to kind of tie that in the next seasons, and just some specific scenes that I think are pretty key to the love story, and how I think the show is going to handle them. So, without further ado, let's hop on in. Number 1. In Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, kind of the backdrop for the romance of Colin and Penelope, besides the fact that Colin has once again come back from a trip and has come in for the season, we have the backdrop of Lady Danbury. Lady Danbury. Lady Danbury actually announces to the ton that she wants to unmask Lady Whistledown. She's saying she's having, the season has been very boring and she wants to shake things up, and so she offers £1,000 to the person who can unmask Lady Whistledown. So this is kind of the backdrop of what a lot of the characters are talking about as Penelope and Colin's relationship is growing. Now, I don't think that we'll be doing this in Season 3. Primarily because, 1, we did that in Season 1 and 2. So I don't think that the Queen is going to once again want to unmask Lady Whistledown and offer, £1,000. But it is a possibility. But I don't think we're going to do that. And the main reason for that is because, 1, as I mentioned, we had Eloise kind of taking on the role of the sleuth for this in Seasons 1 and 2, and also being, accused of being Lady Whistledown in Season 2. I don't think that's going to be a primary conflict in Season 3. But that doesn't mean it's not going to be a conflict. I just don't think it's going to be the primary one kind of in the backdrop of the story as it is in the book. Number 2. I do think that Penelope is going to be unveiled as Lady Whistledown in Season 3. Like, looking at Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, Penelope does get unmasked. And sorry, I should say spoilers. Penelope does get unmasked in Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, and I think for the rest of the characters to kind of take dominance in the rest of the Bridgerton seasons, we will also see, like we did with, Daphne and Simon, that Penelope and Colin will start taking more of a back seat in the show instead of being so prominent, because their love story will be over. So I don't think we will have Lady Whistledown necessarily as like this mystery people are going to try to figure out anymore. I don't think that will happen. So I do think that Penelope is going to be revealed to the entirety of the ton in season 3. So this number 3 isn't necessarily a prediction, but it is something that I wanted to talk about a little bit more, and that is basically the relationship between Penelope and Colin. I think if you're somebody who's read the books, you'll know that this book, in particular, Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, is 10 years after the first book, give or take. And so in the book, Penelope and Colin have known each other for 10 years. And Colin is 33 and Penelope is 28. And on top of that, Penelope and Colin didn't know each other as kids. Neither did Penelope and Eloise. So from what we're to understand, Eloise and Penelope met during their first debut for their season, during their debut of their season, and kind of became, you know, spinsters together. And so that's kind of the premise of Penelope's character, and kind of getting more comfortable with herself in this book. And I do think, looking at the trailer and looking at that first 5 minutes, that we are going to get the same character development that we got for Penelope and Colin, that kind of brings them together and opens, it just opens Colin's eyes to their relationship. But I also think opens Penelope's eyes to Colin's ability to see her in that way, I guess. But I do think that we will see Penelope developing the confidence that she has as Lady Whistledown, and actually translating that through herself as Penelope Featherington, as we did in the books. And I do think that Colin's character is going to make a kind of a big character shift in the beginning of the show, and then kind of progress in a different manner in the end of the show. So Colin is known as being this very charming, kind of rakish but not rakish guy. Like, very, very well liked. All the women like him. But he's a lot more confident, I would say, in the books, and a lot less innocent in the book than he is, I would say, in seasons 1 and 2 in Bridgerton. So I do think we will see a little bit of a difference with Colin in this season. I mean, they already hint at it in the trailer. So, you know, not only does he, you know, come out looking tan from his trip to Greece, but as his brother note, Colin is much sturdier than he was in previous seasons.
Son, did you apparently get so sturdy?
Which, shout out to Luke Newton for putting in the work. But I do think they're kind of setting Colin up to be more like he was in that book, opposed to what we've seen in the first 2 seasons. And I think the changes that they made make sense, because they did condense the timeline. So they had to make Colin and Penelope's relationship be long enough for this to work and for them to be friends. So that's why they're childhood friends, opposed to having met when they first debuted and being a bit older in the show. Which, speaking of Colin and Penelope's relationships, I want to talk about the first big kind of romancy scene. So in the book we have this big romancy scene, the first one that kind of is like, you know, a little spicy. And that is Penelope asking Colin to kiss her, because at this point she's 28, she's a spinster, and she doesn't think she'll ever be kissed, because she doesn't think that she's going to get married. So she just kind of blurts out and asks Colin if he would kiss her. And so he does. And I don't think that's going to happen in the show quite like that. Because one, Penelope is not out of what would be considered meritable age. She's only about 20 in the show, so she's, you know, still within her prime, and she did debut early, and with her sisters, but I don't think that that is going to keep Penelope that is going to motivate Penelope to ask for that, especially because we do see that Penelope has decided to look for a husband in season 3, which is not something that she chooses to do in the book. And a lot of that, I believe, is due to the fact that I don't think the Lady Whistledown, the hunt for her, is going to be in the backdrop of this book. So they had to create a different way to push Colin and Penelope together, which we see in the trailer is Colin helping Penelope find a husband, and also Penelope deciding that she needs a husband. So that is a big change from the book, and I think that is going to be more of that backdrop, and so it doesn't make sense for her to ask Colin to kiss her in that manner. What number is that? 4? That was number 4. I think. Number 4. So number 5, talking about big scenes with Penelope and Colin in the book, the carriage scene. Now, if you read the book, you will know that there is quite a saucy carriage scene in Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, and I in fact do think we are going to get a saucy carriage scene in season 3 with Colin and Penelope. And the main reason I think that is still going to happen is A, I do think that Colin is going to discover that Penelope is Lady Whistledown at some point, because it wouldn't make sense with the rest of the story if he didn't. And 2, we have seen Penelope going in carriages to deliver her things for Lady Whistledown in previous seasons, so I feel like they were setting it up for Colin to track her down and us have this little bit of a carriage scene. So I do in fact think that the carriage scene is going to happen. If you know, you know. If you haven't read the book, you'll find out, and I think you'll be pleased. Brief pause, everybody. Let's perhaps a different angle. Okay, so number 6. Talking a lot about Lady Whistledown. So in the big finale, if you know, you know, but in the big finale of the book, there is a very grandiose proclamation of love and announcement of Lady Whistledown. And I do think that is still going to happen, but it's not going to happen in the way that it does in the book, primarily because Daphne and Simon have been confirmed that neither of those actors are going to be appearing in Bridgerton season 3. And since that big scene takes place at Daphne and Simon's manor, I do not think that it's going to take place there. My theory is that the big announcement is going to take place at the Queen's Ball. They've kept Queen Charlotte as a primary character in Bridgerton, and she, at the end of each season, seems to have a fairly big role in some of the romances, in helping them, supersede some of the societal norms to allow the Bridgertons to marry whom they choose and have their happy endings. So I think the Queen is going to help Colin with his little plan to assist Penelope in whatever drama she gets into with the Whistledown of it all. So I do think that big finale is going to happen, because I think it's a pivotal part of the book, and I also think it will be a really cool scene to film. So I have a feeling that the writers and Miss Shonda do want to keep that in the show. So I do think we will see that major finale in Bridgerton season 3. Number 7. Let's talk about the Cressida of it all. So we have seen in the trailer that Eloise and Cressida are having a friendship.
With the changing tide.
And in the book, Cressida does play a fairly big role in the conflict for Penelope and Colin. And I think the fact that Eloise is hanging out with her does in fact mean that Cressida is going to play a bigger villain role in this season, because Penelope does talk about in Romancing Mr. Bridgerton how Cressida really made her life hell for the last 10 years. So I think it would be within reason that she will still play that role, but obviously it's going to be very different because in the book Cressida is widowed and she is without funds, but in season 3 she is still on the market and still seems to have plenty of funds. So I don't think that would be her motivation. However, with Cressida and Eloise hanging out more, I have a feeling that Cressida is going to find out that Penelope is Lady Whistledown, and I think she is going to use that in some way to threaten Penelope and set up the situation for Polin. I don't know how that's going to play out, but that is my theory because I can't otherwise see the idea of having Eloise cling to Cressida because they're so opposite. But if we're going to use that as a means for Cressida to still be the major villain in this story and push Penelope to decide to announce herself as Lady Whistledown, I think that's how it will happen. Such a lady. Speaking of Eloise, Eloise has had some major changes to her character, which if you follow anybody who talks about Bridgerton a lot and has read all of the books, Eloise's character has had some interesting changes, and we're not sure if she is going to end up with the same person that she ends up with in the books. I do think it's still possible. I do think it's still possible that Eloise could end up in the same romance because there's time. I do think there is time for that to happen, but it's going to happen a little differently because in the book, obviously Eloise does not know that Penelope is Lady Whistledown. So that whole plot that we are seeing play out in the trailer of them not speaking and Eloise being friends with Cressida does not happen in the book. In fact, we do have Eloise being thought to be Lady Whistledown, but it's by Polin, and it has to do with the setup for her book, which is actually the 5th book in the series, and has to do with her having like ink on her fingers and different notes, and Polin being convinced that Eloise is Lady Whistledown. So none of that is going to happen. I mean, Polin could still think that Eloise is Lady Whistledown, but I don't think that's where the plot is going to be. If I am right about Cressida, then I could see Eloise's storyline for this season being a storyline of learning whether to hold on to your anger at somebody who has been your friend for a long time or deciding to forgive them. And I think that could be pushed upon Eloise through the idea of Cressida threatening Penelope with her knowledge that she is Lady Whistledown and pushing Eloise into a situation where she has to decide if she does want to continue to hold on to that anger that she has against Penelope for this secret and some of the things that Lady Whistledown has done, whether she wants to hold on to that or if her friendship and love for Penelope is going to win out and she's going to do something to help Penelope and also maybe work with Polin to bring about the big finale from Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. Kind of in line with this. So, in line with Eloise, I think that Eloise's storyline is going to be pushed back to season 5. And my theory for that is because if they do stick with her love story that is in the books, they're going to need some time to set that up. So I do think that if they decide to kind of write the storylines here, season 4 will be Benedict's storyline, and that will give us a chance to set up Eloise's storyline in season 4, and then in season 5 get back on track and have Eloise's love story be next, and kind of take it from there. So that's how I think we could remedy that, because it will give us some time to do that, and then also we'll have, you know, Eloise, her best friend Penelope is going to be married, so she will still be on the market and she might feel some type of way about that, and we could see that happening. So that is my theory. I don't think we're going to see the running away that we see in the book for Eloise. Okay, I think this is 9. I lost track. Number 9, Francesca. So both in the trailer and in our little clip of season 1, we see that Francesca is taking a bit more center stage as a character, and that is different from the books. So in the book, Francesca has already been married and widowed, and she is not in town at the time. She's not in London. We hear her talked about, I think she's in Scotland or something like that at the time, but her love story is actually book 6, when he was wicked. And I think my theory for why they're introducing Francesca now has to do a lot with that timeline, right? So we're squishing everything a lot more together. So I think in this season, we're actually going to get Francesca's story of how she first gets married. Because if you read the back of like the synopsis of when he was wicked, we learned that her love interest is actually a person that she met while she was being courted and wed by her husband who passes away. And now that her husband has passed away, he has a new opportunity to try to woo Francesca. And so I think this season's story with Francesca is going to be kind of that backstory that we would probably get in the book for how Francesca and her love interest met. And then when we actually get to her story, we as an audience will all have that backstory of that. We won't have to suffer through flashbacks and things like that. We'll be familiar with the character. We'll probably already be rooting for him, I imagine. And Francesca will be widowed and set up for that storyline. Number 10, The Other Man.
This season?
You look especially beautiful tonight, Miss Featherington.
As you've seen, Penelope is dancing with a gentleman and is kind of being set up with him through Lady Danbury, which makes sense to bring her into this because in the book, Penelope and her form a friendship where Lady Danbury really identifies that Penelope is a lot more than she seems and is very interested in her and wants to see her happy. And so it makes sense that she would play this role of matchmaker for Penelope, since we are not going to, in my opinion, have this Lady Whistledown challenge going on in the background. It will be a means of bringing her and Lady Danbury together. And I have an interesting theory about this other man. My theory, perhaps, this is a wild one, so this is why it's number 10, because it's a big stretch. But I'm wondering if this gentleman will actually be the gentleman that Francesca ends up marrying. And that's my theory. And I'm sticking with it. It might be a wild one, but like if we're going to bring this character in, might as well tie him in like we did the Prince in season 2. And I could see us doing that for Francesca, as like he would be around her and Colin and Penelope and kind of be in that circle. So I could see it happening, and I could see them utilizing a character that they are introducing us to and putting us, you know, through getting to know them and bringing it full circle by having him ending up marrying Francesca and then unfortunately passing away, but setting her up for her romance later on in one of the seasons, probably season 6, perhaps. So those are hopefully what I believe are my 10 predictions for Bridgerton season 3. If you've read the books or just watched the show, or if you've been going down a rabbit hole for the past year and a half while we wait for, was it a year and a half? The past year or so waiting for this season once it is announced, I'd love to hear any predictions or theories that you have for this season. If you think that I've nailed it or I'm completely off my rocker, please let me know. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to stick around for more bookish and nerdish content, feel free to subscribe. I upload every Sundays and sometimes on Wednesdays, although it seems to be more often than not on Wednesdays now. But in the meantime, I hope you read a good book. I hope you find some joy. And most importantly, I hope you do something to make the world a better place. And I will see you in my next one. Bye. Enjoy the show.